Welcome, everyone, to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host. West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. You might have heard of cron or WP CRON, but did you know that there's another option for on-server scheduled actions? The Action Scheduler is a job queue library for processing large queues of tasks in WordPress. In this presentation, Daniel Espinoza will explain what the Action Scheduler is, where it fits in WordPress, and how it can benefit you. Daniel has over 20 years of experience as a professional developer. Most recently, he has helped e-commerce brands sell more with WooCommerce. He is a WooCommerce Subscriptions expert and enjoys digging into the internals of plugins to solve problems. He currently leads a team that supports and builds large WooCommerce subscription sites. He also builds commercial WooCommerce extensions that he sells in his own shop. In his off time, he enjoys road tripping around his home state of Texas and watching a lot of NFL and college football. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. Daniel, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the intro, and I'm excited to present. So thank you again for inviting me to present to the West Orlando Meetup Group. It's fun to meet some folks from Florida when I'm from Texas. So it's great to be here. So today I'm going to be talking about using the Action Scheduler. If you don't know, haven't heard about it or missed that intro, the Action Scheduler is a plugin or package for WordPress that can be used to schedule large queues of background jobs or tasks. So today I'm going to be covering 5 things. Why scheduled actions, what is the Action Scheduler, how the Action Scheduler works, if you want to use it in your plugins, how you go about doing that. And at the end, I'm going to have an example and a little demonstration of how the Action Scheduler works. So first off, we're going to back up and say, why would you want to have scheduled actions on your WordPress site? So scheduled actions, I'm going to be interchanging that with scheduled actions or tasks or jobs. So those 3 things you'll probably hear me say a couple of times. So what can be scheduled? And the answer to that is that really anything that needs to be run repeatedly or at a specific time without human interaction. So some examples of these are things on your site that you'd want to do based on activity on the site. Maybe send an email to somebody after they've registered for your site, after they place an order. Charging a credit card, maybe you have a subscription product that you're charging for, or a membership product, and on the first of the month, every month, your customers or your members get charged for their ongoing membership. You might have some batch processing that needs to be done. Maybe you want to cancel a membership or change the status of certain people who are on your site after a certain period of time. Maybe their class is finished and you need to change them to former students or to a different status, and there's maybe 2,000 of them. Not something you'd want to do, by clicking your mouse around, or have an intern do. You can set up scheduled processing for that. Sending a webhook. Webhooks are notoriously poor on performance just because sometimes they're coded inefficiently, or really anything that's dealing with a third-party service that's outside of your server. You don't want your server processes to be paused or on hold for a third party to finish processing to get back to you to release that process to go on and do something else. Or maybe you want to back up a site at a certain scheduled time. You can use a backup task to do that. And so since the beginning of computers, we've had scheduled tasks on Unix systems. There is a server level command called cron. It's usually spelled lowercase, and this is for scheduling tasks to be run at specific times on a Unix system. And then fast forward to when WordPress came around. WordPress has a WP CRON, which is a WordPress core based scheduler for time-based tasks It's not really related to the Unixcron because they're in different. They're designed differently, and one's system level and one's at the WordPress or the website level. It's inspired by Unixcron, but don't get them confused as being the same thing. So the Unix cron has some pros and cons. The pros of it are that it runs at the system level, so it's super accurate. It's not going to be um, held up by any web server processing or anything else, and it can run any script that any shell script that you set up for it. At the bottom of this slide, you can see an example of how to set up a cron by using one line in a cron tab file. Which defines all the jobs that you'd want the cron to run. And it's very specific syntax of setting the minute of the day, the hour of the day, followed by the day of the month of the year, and the day of the week. So this either looks very scary to you, or maybe if you set this up, you understand the power of it and the complexity of it. But in that power comes some of the cons. Setting a schedule's actually really confusing, and sometimes if you have a typo, you can set something to run every minute of every day accidentally, and so you have jobs that are happening when you don't want them to, or you can just make it to where it breaks. Access to this requires server access, and that's not something that you're really going to find on all managed WordPress hosting plans, especially the ones that have shared server or have multiple sites on one server. They're not going to give you access to a server level cron setup. I think the old cPanel type setups did have some sort of web front end for cron jobs, but it was still very, very clunky in how it managed and how it interacted with it. Plus, this doesn't inherently include built-in logging. You would have to write a shell script or write your process in a way that it would take care of logging or notifying you that it actually ran. This is something that would be on the developer, on the person who was managing that job and had to build that into the site. So again, more complexity. But it did, in the Unix world, Unix enjoys setting up processes or setting up programs that do one thing really well, and then just combine those to do combine all those one trick ponies into a whole herd that can do something really cool. Well, cron is I run scheduled tasks when they're scheduled, and that's all it does. So that's sort of the pros and cons of Unix based cron. Now, WordPress cron, you might have plugins on your site right now that are using WP cron. It's something that's included in the WordPress core. It has built-in schedules already defined, such as daily, monthly, yearly, etc., hourly, and then it has the ability for you to add custom schedules. Say you want to run something on the third Thursday, or whenever WP Orlando. West Orlando meetup group happens, so that you can remind Rob to update his cold open or something. You can do that. It's also available on most hosts. Some hosts block WP cron, but others, for performance reasons, but others allow you to use it. And then there's a WP Control plugin that gives you a dashboard in the WordPress dashboard that you can see a screenshot here that shows you what are the defined cron events and when they're, what hook they're going to execute, what arguments they take, when they'll run next, and their recurrence. Excuse me. Some of the cons of this, though, are that it relies on the page load to run. So if you have a low traffic site that is not getting any page loads happening, so say your site sort of slows down at night, but you want a subscription renewal to run on a specific day, then it's going to have to wait until somebody comes to the website and requests a page load to then say, let's kick off WP cron and see if there are any tasks that were scheduled right now or prior that haven't run, and let's run them. And so some people, you might set up a uptime monitor to sort of ping the WP cron every couple of minutes to keep that page refresh going. Another con of WP cron is that there's really nothing that keeps multiple page load or cron runs from grabbing the same event and then running it multiple times. So on the flip side, if your site is getting too much traffic and you have multiple page loads happening, it is possible for multiple page load events to run cron and then to run the same process. So in that event, you could have, again, back to the subscriptions example, you could have one subscription renewal for a candy treat box that would run 1, 2, 3 times. And so the customer may not be too happy about that happening. So it's not the WP CRON is not reliable in that sense. Plus, there's not a lot of ways to block that. And it runs on every page load. So if you have a lot of crons to run or a lot of events to run or none, every page load that's going to be happening. So it does have an impact on your total site's performance. Okay, so if we were to step back and say, let's compile a wish list of everything that we would want in a background task scheduler. We have all these jobs that we want to schedule, we want to have run. What do we want this package or this piece of code to include? So first off, we want it to be reliable. We want the tasks to run on the schedule once, and we don't want them to impact the entire website. We want them to run once with low impact on the total site performance. We also want this to be scalable because we're selling, maybe we're running a membership site or we have an e-commerce site and we're shooting for the moon. We're going to have a lot of customers in a couple of years, and it could go from tens of customers to thousands to multiple hundreds of thousands of customers. We want to stick with the same system and know that it's going to scale up with our business and with our company, and make sure that it's not going to hit any hiccups in the future. So it should be able to handle large queues of jobs efficiently. And third, we want some traceability. We need this package or this function to provide a way to view tasks that will run in the future, and then also provide us a way to look at tasks that have run and have some logging of that process, so that we know we can investigate in case there's some questions or problems rise. So now that we've seen what there was out there, the Unixcron and the WP CRON. Let's move on to the action scheduler, what it is. So you may or may not have heard about the action scheduler before. If you're in the WooCommerce world, you probably have heard about it. If you are dealing in any other plugins, you may have seen the WP CRON be used. So the action scheduler is a scalable, traceable job queue for background processing large queues of tasks in WordPress. And it's designed for distribution in plugins with no server access required. We'll talk a little bit about how you can include it in a plugin, but you can also add it to your site as a plugin. So the first time that I heard about the action scheduler was back in 2013. 2013. Been around a long time. This was at I believe it was the second WordCamp Europe over in Leiden, Netherlands. And at the time I was working for WooThemes, who later was purchased by Automatic to become WooCommerce. And we had a team meetup, and some of the partner developers who had developed plugins and were selling through the WooThemes store were there giving presentations. And so a guy gets up to speak, and his name is Brent Shepard. And he had seen the opportunity to develop a plugin for WooCommerce that would be sold through the WooThemes store for recurring billing. And so it was called WooCommerce Subscriptions. And he gave a presentation about how subscriptions worked and about the importance of a background job scheduler. Again, for the reason that I shared earlier, you don't want to charge customers multiple times for the same thing, for one renewal. You need to be able to send emails to let them know 7 days ahead that you're going to charge them for your awesome product, so they're not surprised that their card has a new charge on it. And so he talked about all of the edge cases that had occurred, not only for just not only for jobs that are successful, but really for jobs that break or stop for some reason, plus all the edge cases that occurred for the different hosting platforms that exist out there in WordPress in the ecosystem. So building something that could be robust enough to work on all of these different hosting platforms on different versions of different plugins, and then also all the problems that could occur when you're dealing with third-party payment processors and other systems like that. I was really impressed by his attention to detail and his the coding, like developer hours that he and his team, later his team called Prospress, they were all purchased and brought into Automatic as well. Just the attention to detail and the development time that they put into the subscriptions plugin and the action scheduler product. On the action scheduler website, they note another company as some of the inspiration and coding. Not exactly sure how they work in with that, but the overall, the overall takeaway from that is that there's a lot of developer time in this library to make it robust and to make it work across a lot of different scenarios. So that's definitely another pro for why the plugin's awesome to use. So segue done. Back to it's designed for distribution in WordPress plugins. So this is a very, very simplistic slide, but it really shows you the power of the action scheduler. So the think of the action scheduler as an extension of the do action. So if you've seen any WordPress coding, do action will give you a hook, and then it will say, go and do this action, this hook, and then anywhere in any other plugin or any other piece of code, it can say add action, and it can be executed at the time that action happens. So you can say do action, notify customer, or my notify customer hook. Anywhere else in the code that attaches to that hook will also be executed at that time. So this is used throughout WordPress. It's one of the main powers of WordPress to be able to be extended using actions and their corollary filters. So actions happen at the time of execution. So you load a page on a site, and then a bunch of actions run to load the different parts of your page. What the action scheduler lets you do is you can say, do that action, but do it later, sometime in the future. Note that the do action later function doesn't actually exist, but it's a good way to wrap your brain around how the action scheduler is working. So you want to do this action with this set of arguments at some time in the future. So a good place to find information about the action scheduler is actionscheduler.org. They have a very good write-up on the history of the action scheduler and some of the different options that it has. There are WP CLI, WordPress command line interface options for it. I'm not going to cover them in this talk, but there's an example of the WP CLI commands that you can use. There's a little blurb about background processing at scale, and at scale we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of queues of hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs. The API, which we're going to touch on here, and an FAQ. The action scheduler is also developed on GitHub, so if you want to get involved or see some of the new features coming out or see how things are being developed, you can go take a look at WooCommerce/action-scheduler. So if we double back to our wish list of things that we would want in an action scheduler, let's talk about how, in a background processor, let's talk about how the action scheduler actually addresses all of these things. So we want our scheduler to be reliable. Tasks to run on schedule only once and with low impact on the site. So the action scheduler uses a concept called claims to make sure the actions run only once. The actions are defined in a table, and then when a queue runner comes along and is started, it will grab, say, 25 of those actions, and then it will put a claim on them. And so based on that claim, any other queue runner that comes along we'll see the claim and we'll ignore those 25 items because they have been picked up by another queue runner, and it'll move on to the next ones. So we've got the run only once option checked. So next to the action scheduler, the actions, they know to stop at or before using 90% of the available memory for that single process, or at 30 seconds of runtime. I've seen the 30 seconds be extended to about 300 seconds, which is 5 minutes. And it's usually a good idea to check with the web host to see what their limits are. If you're running jobs that are dependent on third-party processing, like you're connecting to a mail provider like SendGrid or something. If you're connected to credit card gateways, if you're sending webhooks to Zapier or something, then you want to maybe extend that time. But there is a hard limit on how long these processes will be able to run, and that is to mitigate any impact on your website's performance. So check on reliability. Next, we want it to be scalable. It should be able to handle large quantities of jobs efficiently. Action Scheduler can Action Scheduler can work on queues in excess of 200,000 jobs. Again, it can go up to millions of jobs in one queue. I work with subscription sites that all synchronize their renewals to happen on the first of the month. And so you can imagine if the company has 150, 200,000 subscribers or more, 500,000 subscribers, then when a renewal happens, it's not just one action job that has to happen. Sometimes it can be twice that many. So you're in the millions of jobs. One could be the payment that happens. And then another job per subscriber could be that it's the end of their subscription. And so the subscription has to be set to expired, and then maybe a webhook needs to be fired to update an external system, and then an email needs to be sent. So just because you have, say, 500,000, 200,000 subscribers, all synced to one day, there's more actions that would need to happen during that time. And Action Scheduler handles them really, really well. Usually we will check in on some of the larger clients and see how many on the first of the month, and see how many actions are being run per hour, and it's in the tens of thousands per hour, and a couple of hundred or thousand per minute. So it really hums along. Plus, this is without impacting the main site processing. We usually use a tool like New Relic to watch the performance of the site, and you can see the performance, the processing time go up a little bit when the renewals start, but it definitely plateaus and it never spikes to an unsatisfactory level. So very scalable, and it manages its business really well. 10,000, tens of thousands of jobs can be run in an hour. I already mentioned that. And the third option, the third checklist on the wish list is traceability. Provide a way to view tasks that will run and a log of tasks that have run. So the Action Scheduler provides an administrator dashboard, which we're going to look at, and it's a way you can see all jobs that are set to run. There's a search feature where you can search for specific jobs based on some of the items like the hook, or some of the arguments that are parameters that are being passed to the hook. It also keeps a log of each job run. Now, it doesn't have a detailed log, but it has enough detail to where if you needed to, it's enough of a sort of breadcrumb trail to be able to rebuild if you have a question about something or something went wrong, to see what happened. And we'll touch a little bit on that in the demonstration. Cool. So next, let's look at how the Action Scheduler actually does what it's doing. So the first thing to note about the Action Scheduler is that it uses custom tables. All of these used to be in the posts table, but again, performance-wise, that's not a great idea. As of Action Scheduler 3.0, everything was pulled out into custom tables. All the tables are prefixed with the phrase Action Scheduler _, and there are 4 of them. One of them is actions, and so that's where the actions or the jobs are defined. The claims table is where a queue runner's claim on a group of actions will be recorded, so that other queue runners will know, hey, don't touch those actions, they're off limits because they're being processed. Groups, the groups concept is that if you need to group actions to run in a certain order, or if you want to group them by plugin. So maybe you want specific plugins actions all to run at the same time, you can group actions. And then there's a table for logs, and this is the sort of breadcrumb trail of actions, when they were created, when they ran, and what the outcome was. Only the most recent. So if, say, you have multiple plugins on your site that include the action scheduler in their code, it's designed in a way where only the most recent version of the action scheduler will be loaded on a site at a time. So you can load it and you can add it to your site and know that only one instance, one version of that plugin will be running. It plays nice with others. Action Scheduler is designed to work along with WP CRON and to not interfere with it. It's not, say you have another plugin or other code on your site that is using the WP CRON schedules, it's not going to interfere or overwrite anything with WP CRON. So you can keep using that. Oh, and the last point was that the groups and claims, which I've already touched on. The claims allow the queue runner to only run items only once, and then the groups allow the actions to be grouped by plugin type or run in a specific order. Cool. So here is a screenshot of a local dev instance of the action scheduler's dashboard. So this is very similar to the control dashboard that I showed earlier. We have each row representing a scheduled action. First column is the hook that will be executed. The first 3 rows are an example of WooCommerce Subscriptions wanting to update their cache at specific times, and then the second column is the status of the action. It can be either pending, running, or complete. Pending will run in the future, complete has run in the past, and then complete has run in the past, and running is actually currently executing. At this time, there were no actions running when I took the screenshot. The completed actions will be discarded after, I believe, 30-day window. 30 days of history will be kept, and then they'll be trashed. So the first 3 options here are WooCommerce Subscriptions updating their cache. And then after the 4th row, then that is WooCommerce scheduled subscription payments happening. And in the arguments, you can read sort of a little bit more detail about what's going to happen. So the first row is the report subscription by customer cache will be updated. The second one, the report subscription by product. The third, report upcoming recurring revenue cache will be updated. And then for the subscription payments, you can see that the only argument it needs is which subscription are we renewing? Are we going to run the renewal order on? 155, 157, 149. None of these are actually grouped, so that column is empty. I haven't seen a lot of plugins use the grouping feature, but it's there. It's then the recurrence. So actions can either be single run, or they can be recurring. And then the recurring, you can set them to recur on a frequency. Most plugins handle the recurrence in their plugin code. And the reason I say that is because, say, take the scheduled subscription payment. When WooCommerce Subscriptions runs a renewal, that you're actually the card charging could be successful, or it could fail for a bunch of reasons. The customer's card might have been stolen, so it's rejected. They could not have funds. The network could be down. The bank could be having the issue and they return a negative. Tons of different reasons. And so if this scheduled subscription payment were a monthly subscription and it was set to recur on March 1st and then on April 1st, well, if it failed, you wouldn't want it to happen again on April 1st. You need to set it to go into a dunning sequence. So a dunning sequence is, if a card fails, you would email the customer and say, hey, your card failed. We know you really want your candy this month, so we're going to try your card again in 5 hours. Or make sure you have enough funds on the card on file, or swap it out to a different payment method. You charge again in 5 hours, so that's a single action that would get set 5 hours. It would happen if it failed again, add 5 hours, add 24 hours. So you do that about 5 times, and then the order or the subscription is canceled because the order failed. So again, so most plugins I see will only create single-use actions and will handle rescheduling in their code if they need to. The second to last column is the scheduled date. So this is the timestamp UTC when the subscription, or excuse me, when the action will run. And then you have the log file. So the log is kind of shoehorned there into the last column, but for these actions, they were just created and they don't have anything because they haven't run yet, but you can see when they were created. So the scheduled date for the cache updates is March 15th, 1858.04, and they were created on March 15th, 1843.04. So these are actions that were created by a process and saying, okay, we're going to update the caches. Let's do it in a couple of minutes, but let's spread it out so that we're not impacting the website by running these maybe time and processor intensive cache updates. So they spread it out to I believe it's every 5 minutes, 1858, 1903, 1908. So they're spreading out all of these cache updates so that they don't impact the site. And then the subscription payments, you can see they're scheduled for March, and the payment was created back in February. This is also a local dev instance, so those aren't going to, if they're monthly subscriptions, they're not going to match up because I'm always doing random testing and changing stuff out. But normally you'll see that it's scheduled for a month from now, and it was created, a month prior, if it's a monthly subscription, or 3 months if it was a 3-month subscription, and so forth. So that's the admin dashboard. If we look at some completed actions examples, you're going to see the same thing that you saw on the pending, except for you'll see that the status is now changed to complete, meaning the action ran, the hook was fired with the arguments, and then in the log, this is the log that's provided. You can see when the action was created, when it was started, and then when it finished. So you can see that this subscription payment, which does go out and hit the Stripe API to charge a card, it started and it took 8 seconds to run. So that was and that's pretty much what you can tell. It took 8 seconds to run, and it was successful. If there was a timeout, or if there was some sort of code error during the execution, you would see the details of that in the log, that it timed out, or that there was some sort of syntax error or fatal error that happened during execution, and that would help you to debug any problems on your system. So the workflow of the action scheduler then is the queue runner starts, and then that's usually kicked. Funny enough, the queue runner is usually kicked off by WP CRON, or if WP CRON is turned off on your system, the action scheduler can be started by a WP CLI command or in some other means. So the action scheduler queue runner starts. It claims a bunch of scheduled actions so that to sort of gets its to-do list of work. It runs all the hooks with their arguments in that scheduled actions. It loops through those and runs on all those. And it either finishes its list or it times out. If it times out, then the claim is given up, it's taken off, and then other queue runners come along and pick them up. And then it also will record its logs of each of the actions that it's running. So looking a little deeper onto this item, we can see that what I explained a little bit earlier was on a subscription renewal, you can see based on the schedule date that the subscription renewal happened on February 22nd, and then the next subscription for this subscription ID 149 is scheduled to be on March 25th. And so in the screenshot, I'm using the search hook args and claim ID. I'm using a search function to say, okay, subscription 149, what happened to it? The customer is asking, it looks like we created an order, but did it actually run? So you can enter in the subscription ID and sort of get a history of all of the actions that have run for this specific subscription. You can also do the same with a hook for a membership plugin, or for any other plugin that uses Action Scheduler. Okay, so if if you like what you see and you think you can use it in one of your applications, then how you go about using the action scheduler in your plugins. So as I mentioned before, the action scheduler is actually set up to where it can be a zip file can be downloaded from the GitHub repository. It can be uploaded to your site and activated, and then you have the action scheduler running on your site, and you can use the API to interact with it, to schedule actions to be run in the future. It's normally also included as a library in the code base, and then the plugin developer, all they have to do is include the action scheduler.php file when their plugin is loaded, and it takes it from there. It will create the custom tables, make sure they're installed. It can also, and then it also watches at the appropriate times for running its action queues and actually doing the work. So for interacting with the action scheduler, it's super simple. There are really three main API functions to remember. One is before you schedule an action, you can call action scheduler is initialized to see is everything set up correctly, and is the action scheduler actually running. And if it is, then you can use AS schedule single action along with a timestamp, the hook you want to fire. Our timestamp is when in the future you want this hook to be fired, which hook to run, the arguments that you're going to send to the hook, and then optionally you can send a group that it will be a part of. And then there's also a second API function, AS schedule recurring action. And so the recurring action is the one that I mentioned that it is available, but I haven't seen a lot of plugins use it because they usually handle rescheduling actions after an action runs, and they handle that logic. But if you know that you have a process that you want to run on a weekly basis, then you can say AS schedule recurring action set to the timestamp of when you want to fire, and then it takes an additional parameter of an interval in seconds, so you could calculate that out to be a week, a day, 5 minutes, a year, and then this hook will be fired on that interval starting at the timestamp, and it will receive the arguments that you list in this API call. All of the API functions are documented over actionscheduler.org/API, and they have some code examples. You can review them there. There's a couple more functions that I didn't mention as far as checking is a hook scheduled. Like, is there already a hook scheduled? Is there already an action scheduled? Well, then you can not schedule a duplicate action. It's a very useful API list. So great. So that is an overview of the action scheduler. I'm going to now show a real quick code example of the action scheduler in action. Okay. So switching over to, I put together a quick single file plugin with a couple of functions to show how an action gets created and how it runs. So over on my GitHub at growdev/action scheduler demo, I have a single file that first it just has the normal plugin header, and I have this is just a menu so that it will show up. This my admin page will show up in the action schedule, in the WordPress dashboard, and this is my callback for this admin page. It just has it has one feature. It adds a URL that will let the person logged into the dashboard see a link. If they click on the link, it will schedule an action, and then to happen in 2 minutes from the current time. And that action will then change the blog title to the string new title. So that's it. So the link's clicked here. And then if that link is clicked, we call the function add single action, which is defined right here. Add single action is a very simple callback. It should be a very simple function. It's not a callback. that it sets up the parameter, the args of a timestamp is current time plus 2 minutes. It sets the hook to a custom one called growdev _ change _ title. It sends arguments that aren't needed, but I'm just showing the arguments, how you might set up an array of arguments to be sent. My custom arg is set to a custom value, and then I left group empty because no one else uses that feature, so why should I? And then it calls the API function on line 73, AS schedule single action with my parameters, and then AS schedule single action. If it succeeds, it's going to send me back an ID of the job that it created, and then I'm just going to return that to my my page callback, and then it'll display the job ID of the action it created. And then I handle the growdev change title hook further down in the file, and when that hook is run, it will run the change title function, which will update the option of the blog and change its name. So I'm going to run through it real quick, and if you have any questions, you can shoot them at me afterwards. So here's a local site with this plugin installed as an MU plugin, so it's going to run every time. So we have the add single action button. Before I click on that, I'm going to double check that my current site title is WooCommerce, just the string WooCommerce, and the scheduled actions on the site. I just have 2 pending subscription payment schedules. So let's go back to the page. I'm going to click this, which is going to call the action scheduler API function and schedule my one-time job. So it did action added with job ID 455. So let's go back to the list of scheduled actions, refresh, and there is the growdev change title. Here are the arguments that I set, which really aren't used, but I wanted to make sure they came through correctly. And it is scheduled to run in 1 minute and 49 seconds. And so we can see that the log states that the action was created at 2022-03-17, 2200 hours UTC. So we can either let it run on its own. If I refresh, we've got 1 minute 14 seconds left. You also have the option to just click the run option here and to run the action manually. I'm going to go ahead and I have 1 minute left. I'm going to go ahead and run it. So after 60 seconds expired, this would run. So I click on that. Okay, so successfully executed the action growdev change title. I no longer have that action in my pending list. It's going to be over my completed list. So let's do growdev searching. So there's my growdev change title. I have one in here from 5 hours ago when I was testing this plugin out, but here's the one that we just created. It ran 36 seconds ago. It started at 2200 hours, 49 minutes, 45 seconds, and it took less than a second to run. And it started here, and it was complete, and it was via the admin list table, so you know that it was run manually. Let's go check the blog title. If I refresh here, then my title is changed to the new title string. So that's how scheduled actions get created and defined, and then when they run, they do stuff to your website. So cool. So Rob, I want to that's my presentation. I want to take some time and say thanks. My name is Daniel Espinoza, and if you have any questions, I'm at growdev on Twitter, and my my WooCommerce agency is growdevelopment.com. I sell plugins over at Shop Plugins, and I'm currently building a WooCommerce automated checkout SaaS where my robots will test your checkout with live cards, live money, and make sure that you're not losing customers. And that's called monitorific.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this presentation. This is very, very helpful.
Sure.